call for a seconder to the motion. Call the Deputy Leader of the Opposition and the honourable member for Sydney.
Thank you so much, Mr Deputy Speaker, and I rise to second this motion. This is an important motion and we need to suspend standing orders today to debate it because the Abbott government has been robbing the school children of Australia, and what they want to do is make it possible for the states and territories also to rob the school children of Australia. The whole purpose of the Gonski education reforms is to make sure that every school in Australia is a great school and that every child in Australia can get a great education. John Dewey said it was what the best and wisest parent wants, he said, for his child, is what everyone in society should want for all of our children. And that's what the Gonski education reforms are all about, making sure that every child in every school has the education they deserve. Now, we have to suspend standing orders today to debate this legislation because we need to make sure that the states are not ripping extra funding out of their state education budgets. As the Commonwealth Government tips a little bit extra in the top, the states are ripping the funding out of the bottom of the system. Take Western Australia as just one example. Western Australia, before the election, was offered $920 million in extra school funding by the previous government, by our government. $920 million of extra funding for the school children of Western Australia. What did they get after the election? What did they get after the election? $120 million over 4 years, $920 million over 6 years, $120 million over 4 years, $800 million difference. And what does that mean this year in Western Australian schools? It means that instead of being $400,000 better off on average in Western Australian schools this year, they're $135,000 worse off. Instead of getting more money in schools this year, they're getting less money in schools this year in Western Australia. They've seen hundreds of job losses: teachers, teachers' aides, anaphylaxis education assistants, Aboriginal and Islander education officers. Teacher numbers have been frozen. Teacher numbers frozen, even though there are 11,000 more students in the system this year. What does that mean? Bigger class sizes, less individual attention for students, and school support funding cut by 30%. That means less funding for literacy and numeracy programs for kids, for behaviour management programs for Indigenous students' needs, for kids with learning difficulties and kids who've got English as a second language. Before the election, this government promised that they were on a unity ticket with Labor when it came to school education funding. Every day since then we have seen that promise broken, and broken in the worst possible way, in a way that robs the school children of Australia. The education deal that this minister opposite has proposed is a second-rate deal. It's a deal that provides less than a third of the funding that schools would have received under Labor's offer. It's a deal that gives only 4 years funding, not 6. It's a deal that ignores the student resource standard. It's a deal that ignores the extra loadings for kids from a disadvantaged background with a disability, who are Indigenous, who have English as a second language, or who attend a remote or a small school, or from a poor background. And what's worse, and what we're trying to fix today with this piece of legislation, is it allows the states to rob their own school children as well. We have seen, before the election, states that didn't sign up to the Gonski education model refusing to put, because they refused to put $1 in for every $2 they were being offered by the Commonwealth Government. We've seen them refuse the extra funding as Western Australia refused to accept $920 million of extra money for their schools. But what's worse is even the states that signed up to the deal, they've been given a nod and a wink as well. Even those states that now have agreed, they agreed that they would put in extra funding. Those teachers, those kids, those parents, They had a deal. They knew they were going to get extra funding for their schools. But no, this Education Minister opposite has even said, with a nod and a wink to those state systems, you don't even need to keep your word. We haven't kept our word. They haven't kept their word as a federal government. That's what they've said. We're not going to keep our promise that we're going to fund schools extra, but you don't need to keep your promise either. Shameful.
Order. The question